What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. Today, we are taking a look at the New York Rangers. Chris Drury is probably going to be looking to make another move or two before the trade deadline this year. We're going to go back to the potential trade we saw for the Rangers earlier this season, the JT Miller trade that almost sent Ryan Lindgren, Philip Hedl, and a draft pick over to the Vancouver Canucks. It was very close to coming to fruition, but obviously, things fell through, but that doesn't mean that there isn't still something to be said here. There could be a deal in place somewhere along the line, whether it's with the Canucks or with another team around the league. So we're going to discuss some of that here today. So we're going to stay more on the Blackhawks. I just did a video on the Blackhawks, so make sure to check that out after this video. But I want to dive into the players that could be moving out for the Rangers in order to bring in the players that they're maybe looking at externally. We'll talk about those players on the second half of the video. So we're going to start off with the first half. Two specific players. Hedl's in the conversation because of the JT Miller trade. But then I also look at K'Andre Miller and Ryan Lindgren, who've also been linked to a couple of teams around the league. So the fact that those guys are linked to certain teams around the league, well, then you wonder, well, what could be going on the other way? If the Rangers are talking to this team and there's potential interest, who could be going back to the Rangers, right? So for K'Andre Miller, let's start there. And the fourth period, this is going to lead to another rumor, and that is the Canucks and the Ducks have been linked to K'Andre Miller ahead of the deadline. So this is interesting because if it is indeed K'Andre Miller in this one, there's two specific players on my mind. The first one is Frank Vatrano. Frank Vatrano played for the New York Rangers for a couple of seasons. He ended up going to the free agency market. He loved playing in New York. He ends up going to the market, gets big money from the Ducks, and he's been with the Anaheim Ducks since. It's one of those things where I don't know how interested the Ducks are in trading Frank Vatrano, but that's definitely something I wouldn't be surprised is in play. And the other one, which is clear as day, and that goes back to another rumor that we heard the other day from the fourth period, and it starts with the Rangers. The Rangers, Canadian Sabres, Blackhawks, Flyers, and Red Wings have been linked to Anaheim Ducks forward Trevor Zegras. So you put the two together, it kind of makes sense. So if it's not a guy like Frank Vatrano, well, Trevor Zegras has been linked to the Rangers the past couple of days. Oh, and it just so happens K'Andre Miller's been linked to the Canucks, which they've been in talks with about JT Miller and Brock Besser. Oh, and he's also been linked to the Ducks, who also have been linked with Trevor Zegras. So you don't have to be too smart or too much of a math person to figure that out, right? Things add up a certain way. And I kind of think to myself, if the Canucks aren't able to swing the JT Miller or Brock Besser deals, well, how far along is a deal with the Rangers for Trevor Zegras? It's definitely going to be something to watch. And then the other piece of this deal, which could be something completely on its own at this point, but I think the Rangers are ready to move on from Ryan Lindgren. They don't want to lose him for nothing at this year's deadline, and they also have some young defensemen in the lineup already. We've seen them give the extension to Will Borgen, which that was a massive contract. But they also have guys like Zach Jones still, Braden Schneider. I could see them holding on to those guys and being okay with losing Lindgren. And the Dallas Stars have been linked to Lindgren ahead of the deadline. And that was also from the fourth period. So there's three teams in play here with the New York Rangers. The Anaheim Ducks, the Vancouver Canucks, and the Dallas Stars. So all three of those teams have been kind of circling the waters around the Rangers. General manager Chris Drury trying to figure out a deal, what it would take to get guys like Miller, Lindgren. Maybe Hedl's name comes back into the conversation, right? Mika's name has been thrown out there, but I think that contract at this point is so difficult to move. I don't think Mika Zibanejad is going anywhere anytime soon. So I would make it as more likely we see Hedl get traded at this point before we see a Mika Zibanejad trade. He's got to raise his value. He's got to put up some points. He's got to have a good rest of the season because he has been snake bitten this year. So bad. I could probably make an entire video about Mika, but it's one of those things where I think Ranger fans would love to see him traded because of how bad he's been this year, but the reality is, like, I just don't think there's much of a market, and you're taking a huge gamble on what he's done this year. Teams are not going to really want to touch that right now. He's got to figure this out on his own with the Rangers. And then, you know, obviously the idea from Rick Dollywall and out in, in Western Canada right now with the Canucks is that they believe that the Canucks will trade both JT Miller and Elias Pettersson. And I think that obviously plays into the Rangers situation because JT Miller's been linked a couple of times to the Rangers. And like I said, they almost had a deal in place. So Elias Pettersson would be nice for the Rangers, but I don't know if they're going to be able to swing that type of deal. Unless you're moving guys like Alexis Lafreniere, you're probably talking about some pretty big assets being moved there. And I think they're pretty far along with Buffalo right now, so I don't see that really happening. Brock Besser makes a lot of sense, and Cam Robinson said, many teams around the NHL expect Brock Besser to be available for trade at the deadline. I think that would be a really good fit, honestly, for this Rangers team. Casey Middlestat is also another name that could be available. I think that's going to fall more along the lines of if the Avalanche end up going after JT Miller, I think Middlestat's going to be one of the players in that deal. So I don't know how far the island, a team like the Rangers really is on that side of the foot. And I think that when you're looking at the Rangers, right, like, if they don't get JT Miller, there's other options there. They have a couple of options here that they can go after and still feel pretty good about themselves, right? Like Trevor Zegras coming to the Rangers, they would love that, right? Zegras is he's from upstate New York. I can't imagine that far from New York City. So that makes a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons. And JT Miller, like I said, he's been a Ranger before. I could see them maybe going for even lesser pieces. Like, I consider like a Yanni Gourde out in Seattle or a Jamie Alexiak. Those types of players could be interesting for the Rangers. I think they're looking at the bigger fish right now. But if we get closer to the deadline and they're not able to swing deals for those three guys I already mentioned, don't be surprised if they go to a team like Seattle and just see what those guys could maybe be worth. Because I honestly think Yanni Gourde and Alexiak would be really good players for the Rangers going into a playoff run. Because they're seeing the armory right now that is this division. But I think they also understand the reality of the playoff situation where them and the Islanders and the Penguins find themselves very far down. And what sucks, what really is frustrating is the Rangers are only 3 points out of a playoff spot. But because there's just so many teams congested there. Like, think of it this way. I'm going to put this in perspective. The Rangers have 52 points. The final wild card spot is 55. That's 3 points. That's 3 points, okay? But let's talk about the teams that are between them and the Columbus Blue Jackets for that second wild card spot. Apologies, my phone fell. You got the Philadelphia Flyers, the Detroit Red Wings, the Montreal Canadiens, the Tampa Bay Lightning. There is 4 teams ahead of the Rangers in that 3-point gap. That's a lot. When you think of it that way, that's a lot. And I think that's why if the Rangers make a trade, it's not going to be for a rental. Like, if they're going to go get a guy like Zegras, or they're going to go get, if it's a JT Miller, I think that's why they like JT Miller, because it's not a one and done. Like, they just signed him to that contract with the Canucks. So I could definitely see it being the sort of situation where I really think Chris Drury likes JT Miller. I think that's the guy that's ultimately going to go to the Rangers. But I would not be surprised if something else also comes from this for the Rangers. But I did want to talk about some of those rumors because we've heard, it depends on what the other team's getting, right? Like, there's so many things involved. And I love making these videos because in a couple of days from now, we're going to see the Rangers make some kind of trade, and it's going to have nothing to do with anything we talked about. But that's what the beauty of this is it's all speculation. We could be right on the pulse of this thing. We could be right next to it and get it almost perfectly right tomorrow. But then we could also be completely off. Things fall off. Man, this guy knew we were going to make this trade, and I look like a genius. They make the trade tomorrow. I know everything. I was able to figure it out. Or I could be completely off. That's how this works. So keep all of this in mind, especially when we go through the rest of these teams going into the trade deadline, because things change so rapidly. But I do think the Rangers are going to get a lot of interest for some of these guys. It's just a matter of where they end up going. Do they end up, instead of selling Lindgren for a draft pick, are they able to make him in a package deal like they almost got for Miller for something bigger? That's kind of what you're hoping for before we start, because once we start seeing them selling them for separate assets, like Lindgren goes for a second or a first, this guy goes for a first or a second, that guy goes for a second, like that's when you're going to know, okay, the JT Miller trade, probably not going to happen. But until that happens, keep an eye out. I think things will be going into effect soon there. So that's going to do it for today's video. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, guys. I really do appreciate the support. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys again next time.